And welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. And Heat fans, we have, well, I don't want to lie to you and say an exciting show today, but we have a fun show. We're going to cover some interesting things, but Lino and I were just talking about pre-show. We have been gone for a month and honestly did not miss much. The Heat roster pretty much stands the exact same way it stood a month ago. We'll talk about the options they've missed out on, the options still on the table for them. And then the big piece of news is the NBA schedule dropped. So we will get to kind of go through some of our most anticipated matchups, kind of look at the first few games and how we think the team will round into form around that time. As always, if you want to support the show, please subscribe on YouTube at Heat of the Moment Pod. Like this video if you're currently watching on YouTube. Leave a comment or a question. On Twitter, we're at Heat of the NBA. On Instagram, we're at Heat of the Moment Podcast. And you can always check Lino out at Lino the Reader on pretty much everything and track us down that way as well. But Lino, I'm going to swing the rock to you immediately because you really wanted LeBron on this team. It seemed like at different points it was close to happening, but since our last show, he did end up going to the Philadelphia 76ers. What's your reaction to the Heat missing out on LeBron, and how dangerous do you think this Philly team is?
You know, Micah, as I've always told you, I've always been a big Jordan guy. Not really, not at all, actually. But it was very disappointing to see that LeBron is not on our team, especially after a month of waiting for anybody to be on our team. Getting nobody sucks. Not getting LeBron sucks particularly more because I'm such a big fan, lifelong fan of LeBron. Such a pivotal part of a lot of our success here in Miami. And I hate the Sixers. So it's just all around a really bad situation. I would have much rather him go home to Cleveland. That would have at least felt like, okay, sentimentally, I can understand that and respect that decision. Going to Philly just feels so random, and they're going to be pretty good, which is also super frustrating. So all of that is just worst case scenario for me, and I am not having a good time in that regard. But, more power to him, and we'll see what happens in Philadelphia. But we are left wondering who is going to play for this team still.
Yes, I will cover the less interesting guys that also have seemed to have passed the Heat by. First and foremost is Bradley Beal. He's returning to the Clippers at about $6 million a year, a contract that is one of those that makes you think, like, was this agreed to before? Because he didn't really play, and this amount he just got signed to now, if you add up his Clippers tenure, equals what he gave up in his buyout with Phoenix. So if you want to connect those dots, it's like, okay, he might have always been returning to the Clippers. But regardless, I mean, we talked about on the show, he's very injured. He's not the player he was. Probably still a pretty good fit with this Heat roster, but now we'll never know. And then the other option that we talked about on the last show is DeMar DeRozan, officially still unsigned, but as we're recording, the Peyton Watson trade finally happened yesterday. He's going to Cleveland, which leaves an opening for Denver to possibly make another move. Chris Haynes reported that they are very interested in DeMar DeRozan. So that might be where DeRozan is headed. So Lino, unfortunately, that brings us to, if they're not getting LeBron, if they're not getting Bradley Beal, if they're not getting DeMar DeRozan, there's 2 open roster spots at minimum. There's technically 3. They probably won't use the 15th, but for the 13th and 14th roster spot, who's playing on this team? I think the first question or answer that has to be asked is, how are they going to add shooting? And the name that comes up most consistently is Klay Thompson. We can talk about why, what hurdles kind of stand in the way of the Heat acquiring Klay. But do you have strong opinions on Klay's fit with this team?
I think it would be good. I just don't want to give up any assets for it, like whether it be a ton of money or trading draft picks or any kind of assets at all. I just don't want to do that. Now, if Dallas buys him out or cuts him, whatever, and we're able to get him for the minimum or something of that nature, I think it would be an excellent pickup. He's still a great shooter, and, he's bound to have some of his nights through, an 80, 82 game season. It doesn't particularly excite me, but anybody's better than nobody. And Klay Thompson still has flashes of being a very, very good player. And so it would be nice to have literally anybody right now. And so I'd be willing to take a chance on Klay Thompson, and we'll see what happens, because I just feel like our friend of the pod, Jaron, is begging us to send them like a draft pick for him, and I just can't see us doing that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And I think that leads into kind of the stalemate that the Heat and the Mavericks are participating in right now, which is Dallas is certainly willing to move off Clay in a trade that gets them some kind of asset. And it looks like Miami is only willing to acquire Clay for essentially nothing, which would be, Dallas agreeing to a buyout and the Heat signing him. The Heat have around 6 million left of their mid-level exception. Most people assume that's what would be used to sign Clay. So they'd sign him to a little more than the minimum, which means he could give up that much in the buyout. But it doesn't do a lot for Dallas other than they're currently over the roster limit. And as a rebuilding team, it would make sense to cut an older guy versus a more developmental piece. So we'll see how that plays out. As far as Clay's fit with Miami, I think it's great in terms of what kind of veterans are available right now. Obviously, if this was the first day of free agency, he's not at the top of your list. But I think at this point, I mean, he's about the best shooter you could hope to get. Last season, per 75 possessions, he took 12 threes, which is 99th percentile in terms of attempts. He was still at 38%, and that's with a very limited Dallas roster. You could feel comfortable Giannis would get him better looks on this Heat roster. And honestly, the Heat just need that kind of spark plug. I think if I had to decide right now, and actually this is something I want to ask you too, but let's assume they get Clay, which as we've seen is not something we should be assuming. Let's assume they get Clay. I feel like that shooting guard spot then could go to Clay, Tim Hardaway Jr., or Pella Larson. Do you have a strong feeling on who you would start? And then do you have a different answer on who you would close with?
I think you have to start Klay Thompson. I just don't know that he's going to come to this team and play off the bench. I think he'd rather go somewhere he can play 30 minutes a game and start, whether that be for a terrible team or a contender that needs him more. You're just not going to be able to get away with. I don't think he's going to come here and then not start, at least to start. Like, you can trick him into coming here, let him start the first 10 games, and then bench him eventually. And there's not much he can do about that from there, besides like demand a trade, I guess. But ultimately, I don't think there's much choice in the matter. I think you have to start him. I personally would like to start Tim Hardaway Jr. I think he's a younger player. I think he'll be able to do more for us on the court, and defensively probably a step sharper than Klay Thompson is currently in their careers. Not that he's some amazing defender, but maybe just a little bit more depth there. And I would certainly want to see more minutes carved out for Pella Larson, which leads me to my conclusion that honestly, I'd be okay if we don't end up getting Klay Thompson. To be honest, I think I'd be fine rolling with Tim Hardaway Jr. and Pella Larson in that two guard spot. It's not a ton of talent, but I do think there's a lot of effort there, and I think Tim Hardaway Jr. can get hot often shooting wise, and that would be helpful from a gravity standpoint and a spacing standpoint for Giannis. And if Pella takes another leap and becomes a more consistent 3-point shooter, then I think we have all we need there. But if Klay Thompson's going to be on the team, I just think he has to start.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty much in agreement with you that I think my first pick would be Tim Hardaway to start, because that, in my opinion, at least would give Pella more of kind of a 6-man role to be more involved in the offense. And then I think 9 times out of 10, Spo is going to close with Pella. Spo showed us last year, Pella's going to play. He might have to play power forward, but Spo will make sure he's out there. And I do legitimately think if they get Clay, we could see Pella functioning more as like Andrew Wiggins backup than the shooting guard backup. You might see lineups where it's Hardaway, Pella, and then, starters, Davion, Giannis, Portis, something like that. So, yeah, I think Clay off the bench makes sense. I had forgotten, I guess he came off the bench for Dallas mostly last season. So I feel like maybe if you're at the point in your career where you'll come off the bench for a bad team, like, surely you do it for what should be a better team.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he was starting.
I think he came off the bench quite a bit. And it's interesting because it does remind me a little bit of when the Heat acquired Kevin Love after he was bought out. And it was like he was starting alongside Bam, and it was kind of working. It kind of wasn't. And then it was, that was a midseason buyout acquisition. So it's like they kind of finished the regular season with Caleb starting, and then the playoffs got there, and they're like, okay, man, like you're going to be the backup center. Like we promised you would start, and you did, and now you're not anymore. Yeah. So I could, like you highlighted, I could see that with Clay as well. Speaking of backup centers, that's another position that you could look at this Heat roster and clearly see they might should add. I mean, currently, assuming they're going to start Bam, Giannis, Wiggins, Davion, and shooting guard X off the bench. As far as bigs, it's really Bobby Portis, Jovic. If you want to play him at the five, and Vlad Golden on a two-way, like even Kashad Johnson, who's not a five, he's not even on the roster right now.
Mhm.
So you really could see the Heat, like if there's any night where Bam isn't available or in foul trouble. Same thing with Giannis. I mean, I don't think they'll want to play Giannis at the five very much, but they could. But this is a roster that at least right now screams you need some kind of backup big man. You don't have to get that in August. You could get that in February at the trade deadline. But the name that seems to be most rumored right now is Nick Richards. He was posted in another Davion Mitchell offseason workout video, which I love, but there are quite the volume of those going around. But he was actually, Nick Richards was at the Heat facility, like wearing Heat gear. And so everybody freaked out. They're like, oh, Davion accidentally leaked the signing. But apparently that's not that uncommon in the NBA. Basically, free agents just sign a waiver saying, I'm going to, play in a scrimmage at this facility. It doesn't mean like the team claims liability or
Mm.
anything like that. So apparently it's not that abnormal. But for anyone that doesn't know, Nick Richards, he played for the Hornets. He's a backup center there. Then was traded to Phoenix, one of two Hornet centers that were traded to Phoenix, along with Mark Williams, which was weird. But he's fine. He's never been like a real needle mover in his career, but you're looking at a minimum backup center. He's a big body. He's a rim runner. He's just going to set screens and dive to the basket. So it's nothing that's going to change their title odds, but I think he could be a helpful player. Do you feel like that kind of archetype is helpful for this team, or would you prioritize a roster spot somewhere else?
No, I think that's exactly the kind of signing we need to fill in that spot. Like we have a ton of talent in the starting section of our front court, and when you have that kind of talent, you usually don't have great backups. Like there's no point in just having like a almost all-star as a third depth chart member. So really you're just filling in for health and for safety and someone that's just going to be serviceable out there. And I like Nick Richards. So that would be a good signing to me. I see that Gershon Yabusele is still available as a power forward. And I would be quite interested in that because
Yeah.
I was really excited about watching him play in the Olympics and honestly don't know how his season went last year. But I do think we just kind of sign anybody. Dwight Powell's available. That would make Jaren laugh. Would not be very good, but
No.
he's a guy. There's a ton of bigs out there that are just like Kelly Olynyk right now is out there.
Yeah.
He's looking for $13 million. I don't know if we're going to give him that, but I just think that having a big in that spot is what we're going to do. But honestly, I would be okay with Kashad Johnson just coming back. I'm surprised they haven't just signed him, especially at this point where it's like, okay, we missed out on a lot of the big fish that you guys might have been holding out for, unless they're just done with the Kashad Johnson development train. I would say just bring him back and get him on the roster full time. But do you feel like we have to bring in another guard no matter what in one of those two spots at this time?
I don't think so, especially
Especially because
because
we
of the
drafted Ryan Conwell or
yes.
yeah.
Yep. And he looks ready enough to do what the Heat would need him to do, I think. And also because of who's available. If there's like a premium guard available, like there was early in the summer, there was like, could Zach LaVine get bought out? Like, yeah, for a guy of that quality, sure. But for what's left available, if it were, I mean, Clay is nice, but like, let's say Clay is not available. If it's, campaign versus Nick Richards, even
Mhm.
though we might need a shooting guard more, I'd rather just get a more kind of quality backup center.
Yeah.
So I don't think they need a guard. They really need creation, which that's just not something you get at the vet minimum. So I'm not going to freak out over the 13th and 14th roster spot going into the season.
Mm.
I really hope they're able to get some kind of creator or initiator during the season potentially. But I
Mhm.
think it makes sense. I mean, you could have Conwell in the rotation for the first 2 months, and then you might get to December and be like, okay, this actually he's not quite ready, and then
Yeah.
you can pivot from there. So I don't think they need to. But Clay makes so much sense as a fit. I get prioritizing him, but if that never comes to fruition, I think they'll be okay to pivot other places.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would honestly be more interested in seeing what Ryan can do in the first few months before really committing any kind of money to a vet. And again, we like you said, we're talking about the 13th and 14th spot on this roster. We gave one of these spots to Udonis Haslem a couple of years ago, forever, and people were super mad about it. Turns out that position does not play very often, and
Right.
so yeah, I'm less concerned one way or the other. It's really going to be about what these starters and these immediate backups can do, and I think we'll play a pretty short rotation through most of the season next year.
Yeah. And I think early on, people were looking at the 13th and 14th roster spots as people that could actually jump to like the sixth or seventh most valuable player on the team.
Mhm.
And now at this point of the offseason cycle, it really feels like they are going to be around the 13th or 14th most valuable player. So that's when you're like, well, I mean,
Yeah.
do what you got to do. And to the Kashad Johnson point, I just happened to see this recently, but he is still eligible to sign a two-way. So that
Mm.
could be one avenue the Heat use to bring him back. I think right now he basically has a training camp invite to kind of compete for that two-way spot or one of these minimum 13th, 14th roster spots. The other two-ways right now are Vlad Golden, which that one's pretty much sealed up because of the two-way qualifying offer he signed, and then Trey Donaldson, the undrafted rookie
Mm.
free agent out of Miami, who we both liked a good bit in summer league. So it looks like there's one more two-way spot available, and then the two traditional roster spots that I bet Kashad will be first in line to get one of those. I think the Heat really value what he brings.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm excited about the young talent. The free agents out there right now don't inspire me very much about how much they're going to impact, but I think, the Heat are good at scouting, and I think they'll find the right guys to fill these spots in at this level. Now that we've missed out on all the really important signings at this point, I trust them to bring in culture guys that are going to fight hard with the minimal minutes that they'll play.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to say it. And it's one of those things too. We're all so worried about these free agents, and there's a good chance like Myron Gardner just takes a little mini leap and ends up playing more than any of these guys because he can
Mhm.
just shoot and defend consistently. So we'll
Exactly.
see. But speaking of playing on the court, we actually have the full schedule available. Of course, it's not like the NFL schedule where it's a little more exciting. You don't play this every team every year. The NBA, you're going to play every team. You're going to at least play them twice. Some teams, you're going to play them four times. But that doesn't mean we can't analyze it a little bit and get excited about some of the potential matchups. So the place I want to start, it's just the first 10 games.
Mhm.
If people have been listening for a long time, we did this last season. Those first 10 games were so scary. And
Yeah.
luckily, the Heat got off to an awesome start. The league really wasn't ready for a team to fully embrace the Noah LaRoche offense the way they did. So they survived that. But this season, the first 10 games look a little more manageable, especially if everyone's healthy and we think this team will be as good as they can be. So I'll read them out to start, and then Lino, I just want you to tell me which kind of matchups stick out to you. So we open against Minnesota, then it's versus Detroit, then it's at Charlotte, back home for Dallas, at Atlanta, back home for Indiana, and then we do the West Coast road trip early this season. Go at Lakers, at Clippers, at Warriors, at Sacramento, and then the 11th game to wrap up the West Coast road trip is at the Jazz. But what do you think about how all that looks, and how do you expect the Heat to perform early in that stretch?
Well, like you mentioned, this is a much easier start than we had last season, which is really important for us as we have a very different roster right now than last season. And so through those growing pains, we at least have a way to ease into it. There's at least six really winnable games here. We play the Hornets, we play the Jazz, we play the Clippers, who are kind of a mess, the Lakers, who knows what their future is going to look like. Really, the most competitive games we'll probably play, like the Pistons, the Timberwolves, maybe, if their whole situation in their backcourt runs as smoothly as ours does in the front court. And then the Hawks are supposed to be more competitive this year, but that still remains to be seen. And so there's a chance we can get off to a super strong start. And I always start every season by talking about this random stat I heard on a podcast, but pretty much every team that contends for a title goes over 500 in their first 10 games. And so if you do not go over 500, you pretty much have a 0% chance of winning a title that year. Obviously, if you go over, it doesn't mean that you're going to win it, but you're at least still in the race if you don't do it, you're practically out of the race, regardless of how well your season goes otherwise. It's just, I think it's happened one time in the history of the NBA that a team that started the season under 500 in the first 10 games actually went on to win the title. So if we can get off to a strong start, we can keep ourselves with the right momentum, build a lot of confidence in this roster, and we have definitely plenty of opportunities to do so. I'll be very curious how this game against the Pacers goes. I think that's going to be the most interesting Eastern Conference matchup, as well as the game against the Pistons. But the Pacers, I just don't know what they're going to look like. But I imagine if Tyrese Halliburton's back, is he going to be back by then?
Yep.
Then I think they're going to look pretty sharp. There's going to be a lot of shooting. They're going to play really fast, and playing against that is going to be interesting. And then, of course, the other rivalry or conference rivalry against the Pistons, who are established as, title contenders. We'll see what that looks like. And they'll have the front court to really battle with ours. Maybe not from a talent standpoint, but experience-wise, size-wise, athleticism. There'll be a lot of fighting there, and I'll be curious to see how Bam and Giannis handle that. But out of these first 10 games, which one's the most interesting to you, and where do you predict us finishing?
Yeah, I mean, at this point of the summer, they all look amazing. I'd pay an ungodly amount of money to see any of them right now.
Yeah.
The Minnesota one, I kind of love that for the Heat. They historically have struggled playing Minnesota for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason. So I like catching literally the very first Ant LaMelo game. And it's in Miami, so they won't even have like the excitement of the Minnesota home court advantage going for them. And ultimately, it's just a fun game now that the Heat have an elite player once again to just go down the schedule and say, okay, who's guarding Giannis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you start looking, it's like Minnesota. They traded away all their power forwards, so I guess Jaden McDaniels. And of course, the whole team will guard Giannis. There'll be a lot of help, but it
Mm-hmm.
does matter how much help you have to send, and that depends on how good the initial defender is. Detroit, I guess it's John Collins. Maybe it's Jalen Duren. Charlotte, oh my God.
Yeah.
There's Dallas. I mean, are they going to make Flag do it? PJ Washington, Atlanta. I guess it's Jalen Johnson or a Kongwu. And of course, there's not like Giannis stoppers out there. But anyway, you go down the list and it's like, man, it's really cool just to have a guy that the team usually doesn't have anyone for. And of course, in this case, the best defender in the league at guarding Giannis is now his teammate, which is
Yeah.
very fun for Heat fans. But
Very helpful for us.
to me, the opener against Minnesota, it's cool because it's just new guys in new places. But also as a vengeful Heat fan, seeing LaMelo when the last memory of him is like pretty flagrantly injuring Bam on what, in my opinion, was a super dirty play. Getting
Mm-hmm.
to see him first, I don't think Bam is the type of player that's going to like take a shot on him or something, but I hope someone does. And
Yeah.
maybe that's
I
wrong
mean,
of
Bam
me.
is the type of player to go try to put buckets on his head, though. So
That's for sure. And listen, hey, Bobby Portis, I'm going to be honest with you. My grandma is the biggest Heat fan in the world. She didn't really like you in Milwaukee, but if you take your first opportunity as a Heat player to go out there and just rock LaMelo one time for hurting Bam last season, I'm just saying you can ingratiate yourself to the entire fan base if you set us up like that. So we'll see what happens. In this day and age, everybody's probably already talked it over and it's all chill now, but it will
I
be
don't
on the front
know.
of
Bobby
Miami.
Portis is, presumably, this is not a reporting, but presumably responsible for Bam's actions against Tyler Hero in the summer league. So if we're going to be reciprocal here, then he's got to carry that same energy into the season and
Yeah.
show him that he's willing to go down for one of his guys.
It's true. This is the first offseason where we have confirmation Bam has punched someone in the face. So
That's
it
true.
could be a whole new Bam this
Bad
season.
boy Heat season is going to be
That's
crazy.
right. Speaking of bad boys, Detroit next. That's another great test. I feel like that's a team Miami should be comfortable competing with. They were a 60-win team last season, but they're not an elite team to me.
Mhm.
So I think Miami, like, that should be a winnable game. And then you get some of the weaker teams, Charlotte and Dallas. Got to win those. Atlanta, I think the Heat can beat them. I'm a little lower on them. And then the Indiana game you mentioned, super interested in that. For Heat fans that didn't follow it, Giannis has a big rivalry with Indiana. So that will be interesting to see how that kind of translates to
Game
Miami.
ball gate.
Yeah, they've had some real battles over there. So we'll see how that all goes. And then the Lakers, they're the Lakers. That'll be, I'm sure, national TV game and be cool to see, the Heat match up with Luka and Walker Kessler and Austin Reeves. I was trying to think who
Some
their power forward
miscellaneous
is going to
white boy.
be.
I don't know.
Yeah, if they're starting Sandro Mamushkalavili at power forward, that could be a very fun Giannis game as well. We'll see. And then they rounded out with Clippers, Warriors, Kings. All those feel pretty winnable to me, especially because I don't think Jimmy will be back. Almost certainly won't be back in November. So those should be very winnable. So yeah, I mean, I think 6 wins minimum in the first 10, and I'd
Mhm.
expect closer to 7,
Yeah.
unless there's
I
like
was
an
thinking
unforeseen injury.
6 and then maybe 8 would be kind of the top end
Yeah,
of if things just go best case scenario.
yeah.
I don't think we go undefeated. This is not like a easy 10 games by any means, but I think it's a manageable one. And if the talent is what we think it is we should be able to get over it pretty well.
Yeah, I think so too. And now we can look forward past the first 10 games to kind of
Mhm.
our more anticipated games of the season. I think there's no doubt the biggest games of this season are going to be the ones versus Milwaukee, at least from
Mhm.
a storyline standpoint. Obviously, they'll play better teams than Milwaukee, certainly. But the way it's set up this season is the first game against Milwaukee is November 18th, and that one's in Miami. I personally love that because I feel like that game, they're both nationally televised, the first two against the Bucks. That game will get all the Tyler Bam stuff, we'll get the Jaime Kalel
Mhm.
introductions, everything Heat related, I feel like will be sorted out at that point. And then the next game against the Bucks isn't until January 28th. And that one's in Milwaukee. So then all
Mhm.
the Heat stuff's out of the way. Giannis just gets to have his homecoming game, which he obviously really deserves.
Yeah.
So those are two I definitely have circled. Do you have thoughts on those or another game you're kind of looking forward to?
I don't have too many thoughts about the Bucks games, honestly. I think the Bucks are going to be in a very different position than we'll be in if everything goes the way people expect it to. Milwaukee's definitely in a very reconstructive period, so I just don't find those games to be super competitive. Ideally, we'll see what happens. Who knows what we look like 2 or 3 months into this? But I guess the stories. It'll be interesting to see what Tyler and Hi, man, all those guys look like on another team and actually watch it in person. I don't think I'll be going out of my way to watch any Bucks games outside of our matchups. It is interesting that we play this team 3 or 4 times a year. So that'll be a fun revisit throughout the season. Like we play them again on the 4th of February, I believe. The most interesting thing I look at in the schedule is obviously the first 10, but also the last 10 games is always interesting because we're always in a scenario where by the time we get to the end of the season, every game matters, whether it's to get the sixth seed, to get into the play in, to get home court advantage. There's always something we're playing for, and there's always a particular lineup there at the end that's going to dictate that. In our last 10 games, start with the Jazz, the Celtics, the Cavaliers, the Hornets, the Celtics again, the Pistons, the Magic, the Sixers, the Wizards, and then the Magic again. So we see
Mm.
the Magic twice, we see the Celtics twice, we see the Pistons and the Sixers, which are all possibly going to be very competitive games. I don't know what our matchup is going to look like against Orlando this season, but last season it was awful. We lost 17 times to them somehow in one season. It's unfathomable. And, things are different in Orlando right now. They got a lot of things they got to figure out. And we are obviously a completely different roster. But if they're anywhere near as competitive, and those are the games that are going to be deciding um, how we land in the playoffs, then that makes me a little nervous. The Sixers are obviously supposed to be way better than they were. The Celtics, I don't really know what to expect of the Celtics, but I don't love having our future dependent on how those games go either. So it does look, I feel like, more competitive in that back half. Not to mention we play the Cavs. It looks much more competitive in those last 10 than our first 10. But did you have any thoughts about that? Do you feel more or less confident in that regard?
No, I mean, it definitely looks more difficult for sure. And all those teams, I think, pretty much, with the exception of Charlotte, expect to be playoff teams. And so they'll all be jockeying for different seeding positions. Uh, 5 of the last 8 are on the road, which is very scary. Don't love that. The Cleveland Charlotte game's a back to back. The Detroit Orlando's a back to back. Philly Washington's a back to back. So when you look at it that way, those first 10, suddenly it's like, okay, you really better win 8 of those
Yeah, we gotta
because
really get ahead because
they're everyone's trying this season, right? There's no tanking. So I mean, these teams are going to be really trying to win, and obviously the Heat will be too, but they need to take care of business when the opportunity presents itself. Because even this, I mean, you look at this stretch, you look at the Jazz to start it off, they're going to be trying this year, and they're probably going to be pretty decent. So yeah, with all that in mind, it's pretty scary. We'll see. It's weird. We always start the season with Orlando, and this season it's like Orlando's backloaded on the schedule, so we
Mhm.
won't get to find out too much about that matchup until pretty late in the season.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see them in the NBA Cup.
Oh God, yeah. Also, we can get into that on another show, but our NBA Cup group is insane.
Oh, I missed it. What is it?
It's I'll look it up while we're talking, but it was like Philly, Cleveland. Let me find it real quick, but it was very scary.
I
And
love that.
while I looked that up, I wanted to say too, some other games we just mentioned. I think the first Philly game, the first Boston game, both those will be super interesting, and both those are marquee matchups. Do you think the Heat match up better with Philly or Boston, one or the other?
Mm, I think the Heat match up with Philly pretty well. No, I'd have to say Boston, honestly. I have a hard time even remember who's still in Boston and what they got going on, but the guards in Philly scare me quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we have a much better defensive lineup than I think we did last year. But if Maxi takes another leap, if VJ takes another leap, they've got Jaylen Brown now. They've got LeBron out there playmaking. Like, that's just scary in a lot of ways. They've got a very particular balance between Hall of Fame level talent and really young, high potential guys who are thriving currently. So that is a lot to deal with. Whereas in Boston, the guards are a little less capable. And I guess really right now is Jason Tatum and like Kristaps Porzingis the best players. Am I missing something or somebody over there?
Paul George, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard.
Yeah, Peyton Pritchard can strike fear into the heart of many at times on his best day, but
It's true.
not as much as Maxi and PJ.
Yeah. I would say so. Just while we're talking about it, I did find the NBA Cup group. So something to keep in mind: the NBA Cup groups are like random, but teams are like, if I remember correctly, they're like sorted in buckets by previous season record. So the Heat got like the worst situation of that because the team with the worst record, like from that bucket in their group stage, is Indiana, who should be way better this year. And then they also have Philly, Cleveland, and the NBA champion New York Knicks
Oh,
in
sick.
their group.
Hey,
So
early exit, less games we got to play. Fine by me.
it's true. It could literally be the top 3 teams in the East when you look at Philly, New York, and Cleveland, and then Miami and Indiana. So yeah, the NBA Cup will be very difficult. It's not something I feel like the Heat care about really more than other regular season games, but of course they care about those a whole lot. So we'll see how that plays out. And then the really only other schedule note, and maybe I'm in the minority here, but I still get up for the Jimmy games. Like that's just still feels like a big game to me, but of course, if you're a Heat fan, you were probably watching last season. Jimmy Butler tore his ACL while playing the Heat. The last time that the Heat match up with Golden State this season is January 17th. I don't think Jimmy will be back by then. I heard it's like the reporting right now. I shouldn't say I heard, like I talked to him. The reporting I've seen right now is it's closer to like trade deadline is when they're
Mhm.
hoping to get him back. So that's just kind of sad. It would just be kind of cool to see Jimmy versus Giannis, with the jerseys swapped, basically. So, but those are really the only other schedule things that stood out to me. I think it was very astute of you to bring up the last 10 because those look treacherous.
Yeah,
I saw the Heat did go from 5 nationally televised games to 25 this season. So
that's crazy.
Giannis effect, he definitely is putting them on the map more.
Wow.
I think they were like in the middle of the pack of like back to backs and stuff. It didn't seem like they got a super unfavorable schedule for the
Mhm.
most part. Do you have any other closing schedule thoughts, or really any other closing Heat thoughts in general?
No, I think all that's really left is to just see how these guys do. It's a very fresh roster. There's a lot of questions that will be asked over these first 10 games, and through the rest of the season. But there's really not a lot of signals to dictate what we can expect moving forward. There's plenty of signs that it could be a rough start, just given the nature of having a brand new roster going into a season. But there's plenty of talent on the board, and plenty of chemistry as well, as far as the guys that are remaining over. And we've got one of the best coaches in the league. So it's anybody's ball game until tip off, really. And so I'm excited to see what it looks like. I feel good about these first 10 games. I feel less good about those last 10 games. And ideally, we just don't go through all the sliding that we did in the middle of the season. That post November slide, that February, you know, month of hell that we went through. Like, if we can just avoid that and just have like normal time during that, I'll feel pretty good. But otherwise, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think that's all well said. It's funny. There's been so much change. Obviously, acquiring a huge superstar, but for the most part, I'm going into this Heat season like I go into almost every Heat season, which is I trust our defense, and I wonder if our offense will be able to outscore teams at the level our defense holds the opposing offense to,
Mhm.
essentially. And with Giannis, you would think you'd have a much better chance at that, but of course there are the shooting limitations and things like that. But yeah, it's true. I mean, we're really down to these last two roster spots and then training camp, which fun tidbit. The Greece national team did put out a press release basically saying after talking with Giannis, he really wants to have a healthy season. He wants to, get integrated into the Heat system. He's not going to participate in the FIBA World Cup qualifying games this summer. So that'll allow him to
Mm.
get to Miami before training camp. If you watch like the behind the scenes of his press conference that's on the Heat YouTube, it was really cool. They talked about like we want to get you in early, get you understanding the system. And Giannis seemed to be, very receptive to that. And basically he referred to he and Bam as the ones that want to lead the way, kind of teach everybody how this system is going to work. I expect it to be somewhat similar to the last system. I feel like Giannis, fits well with the Noah LaRoche system, but of course, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think they'll be able to guard almost anyone, and we'll just have to see if they can score. So we'll see. It's another fun Heat season on the way. Thank you everyone for tuning in to another fun episode of Heat of the Moment. Again, check us out on all our socials. And now we can do a little epilogue, which has nothing to do with the Miami Heat. So you can turn this off if you want to now. But if you've listened to us for a long time, especially back when we did our national podcast, Irrational Confidence, during the summer, there's not a lot of NBA going on. There's some great WNBA action if you want to watch that. But we usually get into a little bit of our, we'll call it off the court interest. And Lino, your off the court interest overlapped recently with one of my all time favorite things ever, really. And that is the Kingdom Hearts video game franchise. Lino has recently started playing Kingdom Hearts 2.
It's true.
I open the floor to you, sir. What are your thoughts and feelings? I know you've interacted with the series a lot, but this is your
Mhm.
first time kind of playing front to back Kingdom
Yeah.
Hearts 2. How are you feeling? What emotions have you been going through?
It's interesting because I have stayed because between you and Aaron, who've played the games multiple times at this point, and me being a viewer of that, or also playing some of the games sporadically, partially over my lifetime. Like, I think I've played Kingdom Hearts 1 in full, but I think the only other game I've played mostly to completion was 358 over 2 days, which is two very random games to have completed. But I never played Kingdom Hearts 2. I never played Birth by Sleep except like maybe the first 10 minutes. So it's just all this random jargon that I know and characters that I'm like vaguely familiar with, but I don't know the full story. And it's already a confusing story, even if you have played everything. And so
Yes.
excited to dive into it. Kingdom Hearts 2 has been quite the interesting ride. My boy Roxas has done quite dirty in this prologue. And then thinking about it in the context of what I do know and what I don't know, like just knowing that people get exposed to Roxas in this way for the first time before
Yes.
358 ever existed, and then him just disappearing into Sora is like quite the mind game.
Yes.
for them to play, and quite devastating as well because it gets you just invested enough to be like, oh, okay, I want to see what happens with Roxas. And it's like, oh, by the way, you don't exist. You
Yes.
are not a person, which is a lot to tell a child.
You
So
know, it honestly is a huge creative decision to say, "Hey, we made this insanely popular Final Fantasy mixed with Disney video game. A few years later, we're coming out with the sequel. The first 2 hours of playtime, you don't see any character you've ever met. You don't see any Disney character. It's just a blonde boy with a weapon that the kid from the last game had. I hope you're willing to stick it out."
yeah, and they do.
And we did, and it was a masterpiece.
It was a masterpiece. Not without a cost either, because yeah, when he finally sees Sora and then his summer vacation is over, that's devastating. But what really got me, because I've seen that scene before multiple times, and obviously it's a pretty popular quote as far as his summer vacation being over. That is emotional. But what really got me is when you're Sora and you're in Twilight Town and you're like meeting Roxas's friends and nobody really understands what the hell's going on. But then he's about to get on the train to finish the prologue, and he's like, all right, guys that are not my friends I've never met before. And a single tear falls down his eye, and you realize Roxas is still in there and he's crying. Like, this was the original obsession.
Yes.
He walked so that Nikki could run. This was emotionally devastating. And then I have to, like, I haven't really gotten much further since doing that. Like, I have Sora's new costume and his new form, but you just now know that Roxas is in there and like relatively conscious in some kind of way. So I'm very curious to see where it goes from there. What a crazy game to make for kids.
Yes. Yeah, it was one of those things where I was obviously very young when it was coming out. I think the first one I was like 10, if not younger,
You were
and definitely
quite
didn't know
young.
anything that was going on, but I could tell it was emotional
Mhm.
and dramatic, and I was into it. I think the music has a lot to do with it. All the music in that game is from the, opening sequence was Simple and Clean to all the Disney songs to the original score. It just captivates you in a way that, like, I shudder to think what they could have put on that video game that I wouldn't have been like, this is emotionally powerful. Like, it could have been paint drying simulator. I'm like, yeah, this is
I mean, they
so.
capture you in all the best ways as far as things that are going to attract a young child to like a video game. Character designs are cool. You have weapons that don't look like weapons. Like, parents are okay with your kid running around with a key because it's not like a real weapon, but you get to fight evil and you get to defeat darkness, and there's friendship, there's great music. You start the game on an island, and then you see Disney characters every level that you go to, which is like the coolest possible thing you could do in a video game for kids.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they layer in all these emotional things that you'll return to as an adult and be like, wow, this has been shoved into my psyche for the past 3 decades. How convenient.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just is one of those things. And I'm sure partially it's just because you're introduced to it during your formative years, but those characters really do become like part of you in a way. Like the things they say, the decisions they make. Obviously, they're not one to one to real life, but you do think, like, man, if I was losing all my memories, would I still go back to my friends? Are my memories the only reason I'm friends with my friends? Like, you go through all these like very existential crisis kind of things when you're a young teenager. Which, is there a better time to go through an existential crisis than when you're just getting into high school or whatever it may be? So I think it's such a special series. It's so crazy that it's been going on for 25 years, and I feel just as connected to it as I did when I was a child. And it's
Mhm.
cool to introduce, young people in my life to it. My nieces and nephews are like 5 and 6. So it's like, I'm like, man, just a couple more years and you're
Mhm.
going to be playing every
And
single one.
that's been the cool thing too, or the interesting thing is as far as playing Kingdom Hearts 2 as an adult right now, like the graphics are not exactly inspiring in Kingdom Hearts 2 at least. Like, and when I'm playing, I was like, there's a lot of flaws in how this works as a video game. Like I
Hmm.
mentioned on one of my videos, I spent like 45 minutes doing these jobs to try to get the maximum amount of money to go to the beach, and then you don't
Hmm.
go to the beach. I was like, okay, why am I grinding this same job doing this mail run over and over again? Like,
Hmm.
that's just not a good video game mechanic. But there's something about it that is like, once you're in the world, like, you're good with whatever it's asking you to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll fight these guys with the foam stick in this power tournament against this 130-year-old. Sure, why not? And so I think, it's got the best and the worst of video games within it, and it's overall, but it's at the same time, it was like Morgan, my wife, walked in and she was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "It's Kingdom Hearts 2, and I can't really explain to you why it's good, but you
Yeah.
just have to experience it."
It really it is captivating in that way. Like, I mean, I mean that's an anecdote, but it does speak to, like, there's a million things you could have on the TV that somebody might walk by and be like, oh, that's that, or oh, that's that. But when you walk by and it's like, okay, it's an anime style like JRPG, but Donald Duck is there and they're talking about their hearts and friendship. What? And it's just a weird, perfect science experiment.
Mhm.
And it's like you said, it's something that I feel like, understandably, I think games nowadays, to sound super old, like, they're aware of the internet in a way that's like, we're going to shortchange the tutorial, or we're going to make it skippable, or like, we know you're just going to look up optimal way to level up, but
Mhm.
back then it was like, hey, like, we're going to teach you how to do a combo, but it's going to be hitting like a trash truck up a street until you do it enough times in a row, or keep a balloon up in the air to entertain a child. And if that game came out today, no one would make it past Twilight Town. They'd be like, this
Mhm.
is stupid. Why?
Yeah,
Why?
yeah.
Especially for a sequel, when in theory you've already played this game, you're familiar with these mechanics. So yeah, it's just a precious piece of history, really.
With all this news about Kingdom Hearts 4 and the trailer and the anime that's coming out, all very exciting. The one thing that's super exciting for me is that, like, Final Fantasy has like 17 games.
Mm,
And what I'm realizing with Kingdom Hearts 4 is that we're nowhere near the end of Kingdom Hearts content.
yeah.
At 3, I was like, oh man, this is crazy. Kind of like Kingdom Hearts is coming to a close. It's almost over.
Hmm.
I was like, that is not the case. This game's going to be coming out for another 100 years.
Yeah. It's
And
true. And with Final Fantasy being an anthology, I thought they could go that route, right? Where it's like,
mm,
okay, this is Kingdom Hearts. Who knows what they would call it, but with like new characters, and it's basically just like, they're still Heartless, they're still a Keyblade, but Sword,
mm,
everybody's gone. So it's really cool that in Kingdom Hearts 4, it seems like they're just sticking with the crew. There's plenty of IPs to explore. They haven't crossed into like Marvel or Star Wars, but obviously Disney owns those now. So, and there's still plenty of just Disney original motion pictures that haven't been accessed either.
when are we getting the Kingdom Hearts live action movie? That's what I want to know.
That would be crazy. I've sent my letters to Play Roxas. They've not been returned so far. I fear I've aged out at this point, but I feel like I should still be allowed to, because the first letters, I was like 14. I was ready. So
You were
that's
ready.
really on this movie studios.
We got to get you a hair implant for that.
Oh my god! Yeah, they'd probably go full wig if I had to
No, yeah.
guess. I don't think
I think
I could
anybody
do
would
the
have to go full.
spikes.
The spikes would be so crazy. But yeah, it's been a good journey. I'm excited to keep playing the game and actually play it all the way through. Play Recoded, Birth by Sleep, Fragmentary Passage, and then Kingdom Hearts 3 and Remind. And then that should take me about 2 years, and Kingdom
Yeah,
Hearts 4 should be dropping another trailer.
you'll be ready to go. Exactly. Yeah, after they delay it a few more times, yep, you'll be good to go. So, well, I am excited for you on this journey. Please keep us all updated. If anybody listening is interested in Lino's journey, he's posting some different videos about what he has going on. That's at Lino the Reader. And yeah, we might check back in on the next podcast if the Heat still haven't done anything, and talk a little more about some Kingdom Hearts. But again, thank you all for listening. Tune back in next time. We'll probably mostly talk about the Heat. And as always, may your heart be your guiding key.